Hi, I'm Dennis Argapur. I'm a member of the Student Council Association, or SCA, at my school. With my mom and dad's help, I've launched a series of interviews with community and state politicians to learn more about their work. Stay tuned. I think one of these days I hope to interview President Obama. You never know until you try. I actually think I might have to try more than a few times to pull that one off. Recently, I had the opportunity to interview Virginia House of Representatives Congressman Connelly.
There's probably 70 or 80,000 square miles. Our district is less than 300 square miles.
What is your elected job?
My elected job is to represent the people of the 11th District of Virginia in the United States Congress. And that includes Prince William County, Fairfax County, Fairfax City, and a number of towns.
What things do you do in your job?
What things do I do? Well, let's see, it depends whether Congress is in session or not. Like this week, Congress is not in session, and so I'm spending my time here in the district. When we're in session, when Congress is in session, I spend a lot of my time going to hearings, voting on the floor, and going to briefings and meetings with constituents and experts who help us better understand the issues behind legislation.
How do you keep your job?
Well, the way any elected official keeps his or her job is by communing with the voters and hopefully delivering for your constituents so that they renew your lease on that job every 2 or 4 years. In my case, it's every 2 years. So ultimately, it's the voters who make up their minds about whether I deserve my job or not.
How long does it take to get elected?
Well, my term is for 2 years, and so every other year is an election year. And I would say it takes the better part of that whole year.
Do you meet with other politicians, and what do you talk about?
Sure, I meet with other elected officials for lots of different reasons. It depends who we're talking about, right? So if I'm meeting with local government officials here in Prince William County, I'm talking about issues that matter to Prince William County and to the elected officials I may be meeting with on the board or school board or in the state legislature, and trying to be helpful to them. They have needs and desires and questions, and so I try to be of help to them. At the federal level in the Congress, obviously I'm meeting with other fellow elected officials who are members of Congress to try to build coalitions of support for legislative initiatives.
How many hours a day do you work?
This might surprise people, but I would say my average work day is between 12 and 14 hours. Sometimes it's more.
Do you get days off?
Not many. Usually Christmas we have off. Easter I have off. Other than that, most holidays are actually big event days for elected officials. So I'm going to parades and picnics and barbecues and rallies and so forth. You're in public life, you work most nights and most weekends.
What is your favorite part of the job?
I think my favorite part of the job is meeting people and hearing their stories and trying to help them when they need help. That's the most satisfying part of the job. I really enjoy hearing people's life stories, and I really I find it very, very satisfying if I can try to help somebody who has a problem. I think the hardest part of the job maybe is that our political system does not lend itself very well right now to compromise and to people coming together. We're very polarized, I think, in our politics throughout the country, and certainly in our legislative bodies. And I find that frustrating because when I served for many years in local government, where actually that was not the case. We came together and got things done for the common good. Much harder to do at the federal level in national politics for lots of different reasons. And I think that's the hardest part of the job for me.
Do you talk to kids in school about politics?
I do. I go to lots of schools, and in lots of different roles. So for example, I do reading to the second grade and the first grade, third grade on Dr. Seuss Day, on his birthday. I always pick several schools where I go and read every year. Sometimes I give lectures to civics classes in high school or middle school. Sometimes I've been invited actually to give the commencement address at some schools. And sometimes I'll meet with visiting groups of schools from my district that come up to Capitol Hill, to the Congress to visit, and we'll talk about issues, and I'll do a question and answer session with them. So on many different levels, yes, I interact with students and schools. I also have an annual arts competition for the high schools in my district, which is very gratifying, and that involves all 26 high schools. And we do other reach out. I go to robotics competition teams. I go to cybersecurity competition teams in high schools. So lots of interaction with schools and lots of different levels. I think there are a lot of different. Well, first of all, there are lots of different kinds of leaders. So leaders aren't all made from the same mold. But I think the ability to understand people's needs and have some clarity about what you have to do to try to address those needs, to solve those problems. And the force of personality to put yourself out there and say, here's what we're going to do, after listening carefully. I think that's really, it's listening, it's also being decisive in sort of charting a course for a problem to be solved. I think it also means, however, a dose of humility. You don't have all the right answers, and therefore you need to be listening to other points of view, even points of view that disagree with you, because they may have some answers you haven't thought about. They might even have some better answers than you thought you had. And it's very important for a good leader to see and hear that and to adjust accordingly.
How do you get into an election?
How do you get into an election? Well, in Virginia, usually you have to have a number of petitions. You have to file a form that you're a candidate, and then you got to get a whole bunch of people signing a petition saying, yes, I support his or her getting on the ballot. Then you have to put together a campaign, right? You got to raise money, you got to think about your message, you got to reach out to voters, you got to get volunteers who are going to help you, you got to speak to various groups, you got to sometimes have a lot of debates. You got to communicate with voters, either through television or radio or mail or all of the above. You got to use the new social media to try to reach people. And then you hope you win on Election Day in November.
When did you start in politics and why?
Well, at one level, I've always been interested in politics. I've always been interested in the political process as a way to solve problems. How do you make government work? How do you make the system work on behalf of people who have a need? And especially for people who otherwise their voice might not always be heard, right? So part of representation is making sure that their voice is heard. You have to be their voice for them. And so that always attracted me. It's called public service. And public service has always been very important to me since I was a young person. I was 10 years old when John Kennedy was elected president, and when he was inaugurated president in January of 1961, I was not quite yet 11, and I remember his words, and they were they were stirring words, calling people, including young people, to public service, to give back to their country, right, and their community. And that always stuck with me as something very important. So that's what got me motivated and still does motivate me. Good question about the FBI. As you know, the FBI, the Federal Bureau of Investigation, is headquartered in downtown Washington on Pennsylvania Avenue. But the building they're in no longer suits their needs. They've outgrown it. and it doesn't really allow for some of the new technologies they utilize. They need a different building, and they need a different location. So one of the things we're doing is obviously looking at new places to locate. And Virginia is competing with Maryland to be the new headquarters for the FBI. So one of the things we're looking at is sites here in Prince William and in Fairfax and in Loudon that might be suitable as a new headquarters for the FBI. And we think that we have some advantages here, both in Prince William and in Northern Virginia in general, because the FBI already has a strong footprint in Northern Virginia. So their academy is in Quantico, right here in Pennsylvania, right? And then they also have a big records keeping processing building and facility in Winchester, Virginia. So they're already at 2 locations, so it makes a lot of sense to move the whole headquarters here as well. And so we're going to be competing with Maryland to be able to do that, and we're part of the congressional delegation here in Virginia that's pushing Virginia as the new headquarters, and we'll see how we do.
For PWCS TV, this is Jenna Zagapur, iReporter.